Hello and welcome to this GKW safety training. In the news this last month, unfortunately, we had an incident on November 25th, our first safety incident in which a worker fell 30 feet. He was not wearing fall protection while planking a hydromobile scaffolding. He suffered a 9-inch laceration and soft tissue damage. No bones were broken, thankfully, and no concussion, no internal bleeding, and we're looking forward to him making a full recovery. So this training is on heights. This training was planned before the incident to address the dangers of scaffolds, ladders, and lifts. So what are height-related dangers? The first is most obvious, falling from, but you also have falling objects, electrical hazards to consider, collapse hazards, planking hazards, and weather conditions. Let's look at falling from. 1/3 of all construction-related deaths are from falls. Fall protection is required if you're ever over 10 feet. At 10 feet, employers are responsible to eliminate fall hazards, provide guardrails, fall restraint systems, and fall arrest systems. The difference between fall restraint and fall arrest is that fall restraint keeps you away from the edge, whereas fall arrest stops your fall once you've gone over the edge. Next danger is falling objects. That's why hard hats are required if there's scaffolding above you. Also, we need to consider safe material handling, making sure nothing falls off as it's being lifted up or moved. Also, consider the maximum load capacity of your scaffolding, and any material above the toe board on scaffolding requires capped platforms or nets to be underneath it to keep people below safe. Let's talk about electrical hazards. Whenever you get within 20 feet of electrical lines, you enter what's called the action zone. The action zone is where you need to begin to take proactive action to prevent getting inside the 10 feet limit. The 10 feet limit, you are limited to coming within 10 feet of power lines because electricity can jump, particularly high voltage electricity, can jump from the wires to any other conductive surface. And it only takes half an amp to stop your heart. Collapse hazards are the next one to consider, and so a height to the base ratio cannot exceed 4:1. So every 4 feet up, you have to go 1 foot out on all sides, whether that's with outriggers or other scaffolding sets. If you have 4 sets of scaffolding upwards, after that, you have to begin to look outwards at bracing the scaffolding so it doesn't tip over from one side to the other. You also need to know the maximum weight rating of your scaffolding. The maximum weight rating is actually factored by how many pounds the material can hold and dividing that by 4. So our scaffolding is going to be 4 times as strong as its weight rating. Mason scaffolding, which we use most of all, that is 2,000 pounds per leg, so it must be able to hold 4 times that to be rated at 2,000 pounds per leg. All ladders also have weight ratings, which are usually printed right along the top. Lifts are considered scaffolding on a lever. You have to consider the collapse hazard of lifts. As the leverage of that lift moves outward, your center of gravity is moving farther and farther away, and collapse is likely. Finally, hydromobile weight ratings varies by the setup, so see your qualified person about that. Let's talk about planking hazards. When there are planks on scaffolding, only a 1-inch gap is allowed between planks. The maximum amount you're allowed to have between the planks and the uprights is 9.5 inches. Each walkway needs to be 18 inches wide, and you must be able to reach work within 14 inches. You want to consider what 14 inches is. It's about the distance between your elbow and your thumb. So basically, if you have your arms to your side and you bend your elbows 90 degrees, that is just about the limit to which you can lean out over scaffolding and work. The whole point of this is so that our body's center of gravity does not go over the side of the scaffolding. And the same goes with work that can be done under the platform. You must only do work 10 inches below the platform. After that, you have to scaffold down and work upward. Weather conditions are the next danger for heights. Avoid using scaffolding during any adverse weather. Wind at 20 miles per hour requires a qualified person to approve work. High winds or thunderstorms must halt all work on scaffoldings. And then consider the weather and how it might affect the scaffolding. Water might create wet boards that are slippery, or in the winter, ice on the boards. You can use sand to be abrasive on those surfaces and be less slippery. So these are the height-related dangers: falling from, falling objects, electrical hazards, collapse hazards, planking hazards, and weather conditions. Let's move on now and look at each individual setup for height-related dangers. First, there's scaffolding. Scaffold must be set up by a competent person. A competent person is someone who can anticipate hazards, identify hazards that are currently going on, and has the authority to stop work. At GKW, we consider every employee a competent person. You have the knowledge to anticipate and identify hazards, and you have the authority to stop work if a hazard exists that needs to be addressed. Scaffold design must be made by a qualified person. A qualified person is someone who has training, expertise, and has demonstrated the ability to safely design a scaffolding system. Each job has their own qualified person. On scaffolding, any step up over 2 feet requires a ladder. And any fixed ladder over 24 feet from the landing requires a cage around the ladder. Let's look at the do's and don'ts of scaffolding. The do's, first of all, do inspect daily by a competent person. Keep your scaffolding clear of obstructions. Build it plumb, level, and stable. Use mud sills on unpaved surfaces. Even if the ground is dry, you want those mud sills under there if it does rain later. And complete all guardrails. Don't leave them incomplete and leave a gap through which someone can fall. Now the don'ts, let's look at these. Don't climb cross braces. They are not intended to support the weight of a human body. Don't stand on safety rails. Don't stockpile or overload your scaffold. And don't ride rolling scaffold. Next, let's talk about ladders. There are fixed ladders, which are fixed to a building or a scaffold. The rule on fixed ladders is that safety devices are required at 24 feet above the landing, and a rest area is required every 35 feet on the ladder. So what I've seen on job sites done is they'll build up to a certain level, move over to another set, and then have the ladder go up 24 feet from there. Metal extension ladders do pose a threat to electrical hazards, so use caution when using metal extension ladders. Wooden ladders are insulated, but they're also discouraged because wooden ladders can suffer rot and become rickety over time. Finally, fiberglass and plastic ladders are preferred because they're not conductive and because they retain their strength much better. Let's look at the do's and don'ts on ladders. Do's: use the ladder as it was designed. That means don't use a step ladder as an extension ladder. Use it as it was designed, as a step ladder. If you don't have an extension ladder, you can't use your step ladder as one. Next, maintain 3 points of constant contact on your ladder. That means you cannot carry something and have 3 points of constant contact, because at some point you're going to have to take a hand off to hold onto the ladder, and at that point you only have 2 points of contact on the ladder. There's a 4-to-1 rule on ladders. For every 4 foot of ladder up, you take it 1 foot away from the building. So 4 foot of height to 1 foot of run. So if you have a 12-foot ladder, the base of the ladder is 3 feet away from the wall. And then it must clear the landing space by 3 feet so that you can step off the ladder onto the landing space. Finally, ladder must be secure on level ground, must clear the landing space by 3 feet. First of all, so you can step down onto the landing space. But second of all, if the ladder would slip, you still want to be able to reach the top of the ladder and get onto the landing space. And that also brings us to the security of the ladder. Make sure the ladder is on level ground and secured. The don'ts of ladders: don't turn away from a ladder and don't lean away from a ladder. You are intended to have your center of body moving towards the ladder, not away from it. Never jump a ladder. A ladder is not a pogo stick. Never put 2 people on the same ladder at the same time. Never use a ladder on top of a scaffolding or lift. Believe it or not, someone has done that, and so there has to be a rule against it. Never allow your knees to be above the top of the ladder. If your knees are above the top of the ladder is not able to serve its function of keeping your center of gravity stable. Now let's look at lifts. Lifts are considered mobile scaffolding. Any height on mobile scaffolding requires personal fall protection systems. And if you're doing any adjusting, planking, or servicing, you are required to wear personal fall protection. Scissor lifts do not require fall protection, as at the top of a scissor lift, if the scissor lift falls over, it doesn't really matter whether you're attached or not. Finally, remain conscious of the lever action of the lift. As the load gets farther away from the base, the leverage of that load will be increased and could cause a tip over. So let's be safe at all heights. How do we do this? Planning, protection, and training. Let's talk about planning. Every job needs to have an initial job hazard analysis. Sit down before the job begins. Look at the hazards you're going to be encountering during this job and discuss it. A daily job hazard analysis involves discussing with your coworkers the dangers that might have developed or will develop during the day on that job site, and then stick to the plan. If the plan is to wear your personal fall protection system, then wear it. Don't deviate from the safety plan. Next, protection. Let's look at the ABCD of protection. Protection starts with anchorage, and then the body harness, followed by connection and deceleration. Anchorage, that's the point where you're attached to the surface you want to stay above. Body harness, it must be an OSHA certified body harness that will hold your weight. Connection, you must be connected by a lanyard. You must be connected to a lanyard which will prevent you from falling over 6 feet. 6 feet is simply because that is considered the height of the average worker. You don't want to fall off something and then have your fall protection cause you to swing back and hit your head on the lift from which you just fell. And then there's a deceleration zone of 3.5 feet. Once you fall, your lanyard is able to stretch 3.5 feet so that you're not jerked as you come to the end of your connection. Finally, to be safe at all heights, we need a training program. This is our training program here at GKW, and all completed trainings and certification cards are going to be uploaded on the Hilti app. Paper training cards can be requested from your safety coordinator. So let's look at our incident that happened last week on November 25th. What went wrong? What could have been done to prevent this? First of all, the training program. Even though this training was scheduled next, that he knew he was supposed to be wearing his fall protection, There were guardrails in place on the mobile scaffolding. In this incident, he was not wearing his personal fall protection system, even though he knew he should have been. A daily hazard analysis would have been helpful to stop, pause, and redirect everybody to the importance of safety during that day's work. And finally, stick to the plan. Even though you know you need your fall protection, sometimes you don't want to wear it, but you have to stick to the plan to be safe. The object is to get home at the end of the day, to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Well, thank you for attending this GKW safety training on scaffolds, ladders, and lifts.